My name is Katrina Tillman. I'm 34, and I work as a senior network engineer for a tech company. Good salary, about $140,000 a year. I built that career from the ground up, starting in help desk support, learning to keep my face calm while everything behind the screen is on fire. That skill, staying steady while something collapses, turned out to be the only reason I didn't break completely over the last 6 months. My dad, Graham Tillman, was a retired contractor who built custom homes for 40 years. The kind of man who could walk into a half-finished frame and tell you which beam was going to warp before the drywall even went up. He sold his business 5 years ago, but he never stopped being a builder. He just started building quieter things, plans, protections, contingencies. He always told me, protect what you work for, not because you're greedy, but because people get weird when they smell opportunity. I didn't fully understand what he meant until I married Ethan. Ethan is 32, a part-time yoga instructor who makes maybe $25,000 a year, teaching classes at a boutique studio downtown. We met at a friend's party. He was charming in a soft, gentle way, talked about balance, mindfulness, gratitude. At first, I thought I'd finally found someone who didn't measure people in numbers. But somewhere around year 3 of our marriage, gratitude started sounding like a performance Ethan put on when he wanted something. It began with little comments. Drips, not floods. "Babe, Jenna's husband surprised her with a trip to Greece," he said one night, scrolling through photos like evidence. "They look so happy." Or, "Tyler just bought his wife a brand new luxury SUV. Isn't that crazy?" Then came the word that lodged itself under my skin. Behind. "Do you ever feel like we're behind?" Ethan asked casually, like he wasn't sharpening a blade. We weren't behind. We lived in a nice 3-bedroom house, one my dad helped me buy before Ethan and I got married. The mortgage was only $180,000 because Dad fronted half the down payment as an early inheritance. Ethan hated that detail, not the help, the fact that the house was technically mine. 2 years ago, it appraised at $520,000, and after that, Ethan started dropping hints. "We're married," he'd say with an easy smile. "What's yours is mine anyway. Putting my name on the deed would just be symbolic." I always deflected, not because I didn't trust him at first, but because my gut tightened every time he said symbolic. And then there was Vanessa. Vanessa was Ethan's best friend. She treated my house like a lounge, my food like community property, and my patience like it was unlimited. She was also his ex-girlfriend, which Ethan brushed off as ancient history. Vanessa had been divorced twice by 30 and wore it like a badge of honor. She was constantly in Ethan's ear, telling him I was financially controlling because I didn't let him spend freely. We had a joint account for household expenses. I put $4,000 into it every month. Ethan contributed maybe $800. He had his own checking account for personal spending. But somehow, that made me the villain. Vanessa would come over, drink my coffee, sit on my couch, and lecture me about modern marriage. "Real partners don't keep money locked away," she said once, smiling sweetly. "Love shouldn't come with passwords." This from a woman living on alimony while shopping for husband number 3. The entitlement crept in slowly. First, Ethan suggested I should pay his student loans since we were married. Then he wanted to redo the kitchen, even though nothing was wrong with it. Then he started talking about buying a lake house as an investment, despite not knowing how interest rates worked. Every conversation became a softer version of the same demand. Spend more. Prove more. I'm practical. Not cheap. Practical. I grew up watching my dad work himself to the bone building his business. He taught me that wealth isn't about showing off. It's about security and freedom. Ethan didn't understand that. Or worse, he understood and resented that I wouldn't use it to impress his audience. The breaking point with Vanessa came about 6 months before everything blew up. She was over for one of their weekly girls' brunches, and afterward Ethan came to me with a rehearsed smile. "Vanessa has this business opportunity," he said. "Essential oils. It's network marketing." I stared at him. "She needs seed money," he added. 15,000. I laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "It's not a pyramid scheme," Ethan insisted quickly. "Vanessa's making 6 figures." "She's lying," I said. "Show me her tax returns." His expression hardened. "So you don't trust me?" "I don't trust Vanessa not to scam you out of 15 grand we'll never see again." We fought for 3 days. I didn't give him the money. Vanessa started posting vague quotes about toxic partners and financial abuse. Ethan stopped talking to me and moved into the guest room for 9 days, slamming cabinets, sighing dramatically, making sure I heard his phone calls. Then I noticed the phone behavior, tilting it away, stepping outside, changing his passcode from our anniversary. I told myself he was being petty. Then my dad got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosis to death in 4 months. I spent every evening with him. Took vacation days. Moved him into our guest room the last month so I could care for him properly. Ethan complained constantly. He should be in a facility, he said once. That's what they're for. Dad was asleep down the hall. That's my father, I said. I'm just being practical, Ethan replied. The word tasted rotten. Even the cost of Dad's medication, about $800 a month, became an issue. We're supposed to be saving for our future, Ethan whispered one night, not spending everything on someone who's already lived their life. There's practical, I said coldly, and then there's heartless. Guess which one you are right now. He rolled his eyes and went back to his phone. Dad noticed everything. He never said a word, just watched. 2 weeks before he died, he called me into his room while Ethan was out teaching. Katrina, he said, eyes sharp despite the pain, Ethan's going to leave you. I tried to protest. Dad raised his hand. I've seen this before. Some people don't see death as loss. They see it as timing. He squeezed my hand. I set something up with my attorney, just in case. What kind of something? I asked. Protection, he said quietly. Dad died 13 days later at 4:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was holding his hand. Ethan stayed in bed. I had to wake him. Okay, he said flatly. We'll deal with it in the morning. No tears, no hug. The funeral was small, simple, exactly how Dad wanted it. At the reception afterward, Ethan approached me, holding a manila folder. We need to talk, he said, in private. Inside an empty office, he opened the folder. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I'm filing for divorce, he said. I've waited long enough. Then he smiled. I'm asking for half of everything. And suddenly, my father's words echoed in my head like a hammer striking steel. You'll find out real quick after I'm gone. I took the folder from his hands. Understood, I said. His smile faltered. That's it? You served me divorce papers at my father's funeral, I replied. What exactly is there to fight for? He had no answer. I walked back into the reception knowing one thing for certain. My father hadn't just left me memories. He'd left me a locked door. And Ethan had already signed the key away. I didn't cry that night. That was the strangest part. After the funeral reception ended, after the last handshake and quiet condolences, after I drove home alone with the manila folder sitting on the passenger seat like a live wire, I didn't cry. I changed into sweatpants, made tea I didn't drink, sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room and stared at the wall until the sky outside lightened from black to gray. Ethan slept in our bedroom like nothing had happened. That told me everything I needed to know. Monday morning, I made the call my father had clearly anticipated. Leonard Marks, my dad's attorney. I need to come in, I said, today. There was a pause on the line, brief, knowing. Your father said you might call, Leonard replied. Can you be here at 2? Yes. And Katrina, he added gently, bring the divorce papers. And don't discuss anything about your father's estate or any trust with your husband, not yet. That last part sent a chill through me. Leonard's office smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. The same place Dad had brought me years ago to sign a few things related to the house. At the time, I'd barely paid attention. Dad handled details like gravity handled falling objects. Leonard closed the door, motioned for me to sit, and read through Ethan's petition. He actually laughed. Not cruelly, more like someone watching a predictable storm finally arrive. He's asking for half of everything, Leonard said. House, vehicles, retirement, even future inheritance. I swallowed. Can he do that? Leonard leaned back. He can ask. That doesn't mean he'll get. He slid a thick folder across the desk. This, he said, tapping it once, is what your father spent years putting together. He walked me through it slowly, carefully, like he knew every word carried weight. 9 years ago, before I even met Ethan, my father had created a family trust. Every major asset he owned, investment accounts, vehicles, properties, had been transferred into it over time, including the portion of my house he'd funded through the down payment. I didn't know about the rentals, I said quietly. Leonard smiled. Most people didn't. 2 duplexes on Elm Street, bought in the 90s for next to nothing, paid off years ago, quietly cash flowing for decades. Together worth over $750,000. My chest tightened. Why wouldn't he tell me? Leonard's expression softened. Your father was proud you were building your own life. He didn't want money changing who you were or how people treated you. Then he flipped to a page I suddenly recognized. A memory clicked into place. Sitting in this very office years ago. Dad saying, read pages 3 and 4 carefully. Ethan scrolling his phone, bored, signing wherever the pen landed. Leonard pointed. This is the beneficiary and asset waiver your husband signed. My stomach dropped. It states very clearly that Ethan waived any claim to assets transferred from your father to you during his life or after his death, inheritance included. I remember reading it, I whispered. Yes, your father insisted you do. Ethan, on the other hand. Leonard tapped 6 separate initials. Signed and initialed, without reading. I closed my eyes. So, the house? Trust-owned, Leonard said calmly. Your name is on the deed as resident, but the controlling interest belongs to the trust. And my retirement? Your father was exceptionally thorough, Leonard said. Remember when he encouraged you to set up that consulting LLC 3 years ago? I nodded. Dad had framed it as tax efficiency. That LLC is trust-owned. A portion of your income flows through it. Your retirement contributions made from that income are classified as trust-derived. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Leonard met my eyes. Katrina, your husband is operating on incomplete information, and that's exactly how your father wanted it. I drove home feeling hollow and protected in a way I'd never felt before. Ethan was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, smug energy radiating off him like static. So, he asked, talked to a lawyer yet? Yes. And? His smile widened. I assume they told you not to fight it. Saves money in the long run. I looked at him for a long moment. Everything will be handled through attorneys, I said. I'm moving into the guest room permanently. His smile twitched. Wow, cold. No, I replied evenly. Clear. That irritated him more than yelling ever could. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan transformed. He strutted around the house like he'd already won the lottery, ordered takeout constantly, came home with new clothes, talked loudly on the phone with Vanessa about condos downtown and trips to Europe. 7 years of marriage, he said one night, not even looking at me. I deserve what's fair. I said nothing. Vanessa came over more often, lounging on the couch, sipping wine, smirking when she thought I wasn't looking. You're going to regret being so stubborn, she told me once, her voice sugar-sweet. Judges hate controlling women. I didn't respond, because silence, real silence, terrifies people who think they're winning. Then the first letter came from Ethan's attorney, demanding I vacate the house, demanding temporary spousal support, demanding full financial disclosure going back a decade. My attorney, Diana Brooks, answered with a response so clean and devastating it made Ethan's fantasy collapse in real time. Attached, the trust documents. All of them. The creation date, the asset transfers, the waiver. 2 days later, Ethan called me at work, screaming. What the hell is this trust nonsense? He shouted. You can't just hide assets. I didn't hide anything, I said calmly. My father created it 9 years ago, before we met. That's illegal! According to who? My lawyer. Then your lawyer should read page 4. There was silence on the line, long, heavy. I never signed anything like that, Ethan said finally, his voice smaller. You did, I replied. 6 times. You might want to check your initials. Another pause. I didn't know what I was signing, he said weakly. That's not a legal defense, I answered. That's negligence. He hung up. An hour later, he called back crying. Full victim mode. This isn't fair, he sobbed. I gave up things for this marriage. I supported you. You contributed $800 a month, I said evenly, and complained every step of the way. You tricked me, he snapped suddenly. You and your dad planned this. No, I said quietly. My dying father protected me from exactly this moment. That's when Ethan finally broke. Yelling, threats, promises to destroy me in court. I listened until he ran out of air. Then I said, all communication goes through attorneys now. And I hung up. 2 weeks later, discovery began. And everything Ethan thought he knew about my life, about money, about power, about control, started falling apart, one document at a time. Discovery didn't explode all at once. It cracked, slowly, methodically, like ice spreading across a windshield. Quiet, unstoppable, impossible to ignore once you saw it. Ethan still acted like he was winning. He walked around the house with his shoulders back, phone pressed to his ear, voice loud on purpose. Yeah, my attorney says it's basically a slam dunk, he told Vanessa one afternoon, pacing the kitchen. Judges always side with the lower earner. She'll have to sell the house. I'll get my half. I was at the sink, rinsing a mug. I didn't look up. Vanessa laughed on speakerphone. Told you, she thinks she's so smart. Everyone slips eventually. I dried my hands, walked past him, closed the guest room door. Let him believe it, because the first discovery packet hit Ethan's legal team that Friday. And the confidence started leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. It began with the dates. The trust formation, 9 years ago, notarized, filed with the state, created months before I even met Ethan. Then the asset trail. Investment accounts my father had quietly grown over decades, vehicles titled under a trust-owned LLC. The controlling interest in the house, transferred long before my father died. Then came the properties, 2 duplexes on Elm Street, purchased in 1996, paid off by 2011, managed professionally, netting $3,400 a month after expenses. Ethan had never known they existed, neither had Vanessa. That realization hit like a body blow. Diana called me the afternoon the rental property disclosures were sent. "Brace yourself," she said. "This is where things get emotional." She wasn't wrong. Ethan came home that night pale and furious. "What the hell is Elm Street?" he demanded, slamming his phone on the counter. "You've been hiding rental properties?" I set my fork down. "They're trust assets. My father bought them decades ago." "You lived in this house for 7 years without telling me about $500,000 in properties?" "They weren't mine to disclose," I said calmly. "They were my father's." "Then why do you have them now?" I met his eyes. "Because you signed a waiver." His face flushed red. "I didn't know what I was signing." "You were offered time to read it. You didn't." Vanessa showed up uninvited that night, like a summoned demon. She burst into the kitchen, eyes blazing. "This is fraud. You can't just hide money in trust to screw over your spouse." Diana's words echoed in my head. "Say nothing." "So I didn't." Vanessa mistook silence for weakness. She leaned closer. "Judges don't like sneaky women, Katrina." I looked at her then, really looked. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. Vanessa scoffed, but Ethan grabbed her arm. "Let's go." That was the first time I saw fear in his eyes. A week later, his attorney filed an emergency motion, claiming the trust was created to defraud marital property rights. Diana dismantled it in 24 hours. Not with emotion, with paperwork, notarized dates, bank records, case law. The judge denied the motion without a hearing. That's when Ethan's attorney started charging by the hour, more aggressively than before. And Ethan started asking questions he should have asked years ago. "How much do you think this is costing me?" he snapped one night. "You hired the attorney," I replied. "You're enjoying this." I shook my head. "I'm surviving it." Then came the phone call that changed everything. Diana called me mid-morning, her voice sharp with satisfaction. "Ethan's attorney is withdrawing." I blinked. "What?" "She sent notice to the court this morning. 30,000 in unpaid fees and no viable path to win. She told him she doesn't take cases to trial. She knows she'll lose." I sat down slowly. 30,000. Ethan didn't have 30,000. He came home early that day. The bravado was gone, the swagger stripped clean. He stood in the doorway of the guest room like a stranger. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. I didn't answer. "I shouldn't have filed," he continued. I was angry. Vanessa got in my head. There it was. The pivot. "We can fix this," he said, voice trembling now. "I'll withdraw the petition. We'll go to counseling. I still love you." I looked at him. Really looked. This man who complained about my dying father's medication costs, who waited until the funeral to hand me divorce papers, who smiled when he said he wanted half of everything. "You don't love me," I said. "You love the outcome you imagined." "That's not fair." "No," I replied. "It's accurate." He dropped to sit on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "I don't have anywhere to go," he whispered. "I can't afford a place on what I make." That was the moment something inside me went still. "You should have thought about that," I said softly, "before you tried to profit from my grief." 2 days later, the court granted exclusive possession of the house to me. Ethan had 30 days to vacate. He didn't scream this time. He cried. Vanessa took him in. And suddenly, all those loud phone calls about condos and European vacations disappeared. Instead, Ethan picked up more yoga classes, then shifts at a health food store. He started posting sad quotes online about betrayal and misunderstood men. Vanessa posted rants about a legal system rigged against men with money. Diana sent her a cease and desist letter. The posts vanished within 90 minutes. As for me, the house was quiet again. Too quiet at first. But slowly, the silence stopped feeling like loneliness. It started feeling like peace. And we still hadn't reached the final hearing. By the time the final hearing approached, Ethan looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 months. The yoga pants were still there, the soft voice, the carefully curated "I'm healed" aesthetic. But the confidence, the entitlement that once sat on his shoulders like a crown, was gone. The court calendar labeled it neutrally, final dissolution hearing. There was nothing neutral about what it meant. Ethan showed up dressed in all black. Not professional black, mourning black. As if grief were a costume he could still wear convincingly. He sat at the opposite table alone. No attorney. just a stack of poorly organized papers, and the hollow look of someone who finally understands the math and hates the answer. Vanessa sat in the back row, arms crossed, eyes sharp. She didn't look at me. I sat beside Diana, hands folded, spine straight, heart steady. The judge entered, an older woman with tired eyes and no patience for theater. She skimmed the file. Dates, timelines, signatures. Then she looked up at Ethan. "Mr. Tillman," she said evenly, "you filed for divorce on the day of your wife's father's funeral." Ethan shifted. "I wanted to give her space to grieve." The judge raised an eyebrow. "By serving divorce papers at the reception?" Vanessa leaned forward. The judge didn't look at her. "That is a remarkable definition of space," the judge continued. "Your sympathy appears selective." Ethan swallowed. He launched into his prepared speech anyway. How I had changed after my father got sick. How I'd become cold, calculating. How he'd hoped I would grieve, heal, and become the woman he married again. How he still loved me, but couldn't reach me anymore. It was well rehearsed. Too well. The judge listened without interruption. Then she turned a page. "Ms. Tillman," she said, addressing me now, "did you coerce your husband into signing the beneficiary waiver dated May 14th, 9 years ago?" "No, Your Honor," I replied calmly. "He was offered time to read it and the option to have independent counsel review it." The judge nodded and looked back at Ethan. "You initialed 6 separate clauses explicitly stating you waived any claim to assets transferred from your wife's father," she said. "Is that your signature?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Yes." "And did anyone prevent you from reading the document?" "No." "Did anyone threaten you?" "No." She closed the file. "Then you were not tricked," the judge said flatly. "You were negligent." Vanessa scoffed aloud. The bailiff shot her a warning glance. The judge continued. "The trust was formed prior to the marriage. The waiver is valid. The assets in question are non-marital." She paused, just long enough for the words to settle. "Petitioner is awarded 50% of the joint account balance at time of separation, personal belongings, and his vehicle, subject to its outstanding loan." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "Respondent retains sole possession of the marital residence and all trust-held assets." Vanessa's face went white. "Petitioner," the judge added, eyes sharp now, "your attempt to frame this as emotional abandonment while simultaneously filing for divorce at a funeral does not serve you." Silence filled the room. "Petition granted," she said. "Next case." The gavel came down. Just like that. 7 years reduced to signatures and stamps. Outside the courtroom, Ethan tried one last time. "Katrina," he said, voice breaking, "I didn't think it would end like this." I stopped walking. Turned. "You're right," I said quietly. "You didn't think." Then I kept going. Vanessa didn't follow. She posted one final rant that night, accusing me of manipulation, asset hiding, emotional abuse. Diana sent another letter. It disappeared. Ethan moved out 2 weeks later. He left behind a house that felt lighter the moment the door closed. The divorce finalized 3 months after my father died. Ethan walked away with $400 from the joint account and a car he was still paying for. After legal fees, he was thousands in the hole. I walked away with grief. And security. And the quiet knowledge that my father had seen everything coming. But the story didn't end there. Because grief doesn't vanish when justice arrives. It just finally has room to breathe. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my kitchen on a quiet Sunday morning and realized something had changed. The house felt like mine again. Not legally. That had never been in question. But emotionally. The air no longer carried tension, no longer waited for the next complaint or comparison or demand disguised as conversation. Silence had stopped feeling like punishment. It felt like rest. The rental properties paid themselves without drama. $3,400 a month in clean, predictable income. The investment accounts my father built continued to grow steadily, just as he'd planned. At work, I got a promotion that bumped my salary to $165,000, not because I was chasing anything, just because I finally had the mental space to show up fully again. I thought of my father often, not with the sharp pain that had lived in my chest the first few months, but with something steadier, gratitude, pride, a sense of being watched over in a way that didn't feel heavy. He hadn't protected me to win. He'd protected me so I could heal. I didn't post anything on social media. No victory laps, no vague quotes. Ethan and Vanessa handled that part on their own. Ethan moved in with Vanessa and learned quickly that being free looks different when rent is due. He worked full-time at the yoga studio and picked up evening shifts at a health food store to afford his half of the apartment. The soft-spoken entitlement didn't age well under fluorescent lights. Vanessa posted dramatic essays about betrayal, the legal system being rigged, how women are punished for trusting the wrong men. Then she went quiet. 2 weeks later, her profile disappeared altogether. I didn't ask questions. About 4 months after the divorce, I ran into Ethan at a grocery store. Produce aisle. He looked tired, thinner, older than I remembered, like life had started charging interest. Katrina, he said softly, stepping toward me. Can we talk? No, I replied, not unkindly, just certain. I reached for a bag of apples and walked away. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. Later, through mutual acquaintances, I heard Ethan was dating someone new. A man who worked retail and still lived with his parents. They looked happy in photos, but happiness that needs constant proof usually doesn't last. Vanessa apparently had moved on too. Another relationship, another promise, another story about how this time it would be different. I hoped it was, for all of them. As for me, I started dating again slowly, carefully. Not because I was lonely, but because I was open. I met Daniel, a civil engineer who paid for his own coffee and argued with me over splitting the check. He never asked what my house was worth, never hinted at what he deserved. It was refreshing. One night, sitting on my back porch with the lights low, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry at Ethan anymore. Anger had done its job. It had woken me up. What remained was clarity. Ethan didn't destroy my life. He revealed it. He showed me who he was when he thought the timing was perfect. And my father, quiet, steady, always building, had made sure that revelation didn't cost me everything. I still miss my dad. That will never change. But now, when I think of him, I don't just remember the loss. I remember the lesson. Love protects. And sometimes, protection looks like paperwork signed by someone who never bothered to read the fine print.